Okay, hey folks, it's Sam. I'm talking today about the current Mercury retrograde, um, which is happening between Libra and Virgo. I just uh, Here's the chart, and we're going to talk about that today. Um, you can see here. Let me actually make the chart a little bigger. Whoops, one big chart. That's it. Okay, look at that. Now it's one big chart, right? Because I'm not going to be looking at harmonics or transits or anything. We're just going to move this chart. Um, so we're going to be looking at the at this current shift of this Mercury retrograde, and um, what it's going to entail for the next couple weeks. Now, the Mercury retrograde started a couple days ago. It was about a week ago now. When did it start? I don't know. The 27th. Yeah, so that was at the beginning of this week. And you see it was in Libra. And then it's going to go back into Virgo here, as we see. It goes back into Virgo. And then will go direct and then go back into Libra. So um, this is what we're going to talk about, this kind of shifting here. We're also going to talk about how it's going to be joined this Mars combustion. Talk about a few other things here, like this Jupiter just gone retrograde back into Capricorn. I'll hit a few of the kind of social things that are going on a little bit, but so that's what we're going to do. Venus is also going into Scorpio here. So we got quite a few changes coming. By the way, I talked about them in my October 2021 forecast. Go ahead and watch that for sure if you haven't watched it yet. And also, again, I also talk in detail about this Mercury retrograde cycle in my end of 2021 forecast. If you go to endoftheyearastrology.com, it has that class there. It's free. You can just register. And one of the big shifts that I talk about is this Mercury retrograde cycle. And I don't just talk about it in context of the retrograde, but I talk about it in context of the two signs that it highlights. Because that's one thing about Mercury retrograde is it usually happens in between two different signs. Sometimes it just sets up in one sign the whole time, but often it will highlight two different signs like it has this time. And the two signs are Libra and Virgo. So again, I'll just show you, if you go back a few weeks to when Mercury first entered Virgo. Oops. Okay, so it just first entered Virgo like the around the end of August, right? Like August 27th or something like that. That's when it entered Virgo. I'll do the exact day because I'm just a little bit anal like that. Okay, it was the 26th. Okay. So August 26th, Mercury enters Virgo. And then again, it's going to go into Libra, then go back. And watch and see how long it takes. So from August 27th until, we're going to see when it goes into Scorpio, August 27th until like the end of November, like November 23rd or something. Let's go back and see what's the exact day. November 20th. So August 27th until November 20th, August, September, October, almost 3 months, Mercury is in just these two signs. So again, that's really important because these two signs, Virgo and Libra, are really very auspicious for Mercury, because Mercury is the ruler of Virgo, and it's also really powerful in Libra, where it's with its friend, where its friend Venus is the ruler. So now we're here at this, here on October 1st. That's when I'm recording this. So here on October 1st, we see that Mercury is like right about to go into Virgo. In fact, by tomorrow, October 2nd, Mercury is in Virgo. So that's very significant. Just 1 second here. Okay, got it. All right, so these two signs of Virgo and Libra, I talked about this before, but Virgo is really where we want to, where we organize our life and we get things very, structured. Think of having, let's say, like you organize your life and your room as much as we can organize our life. And then once we get things organized and structured, then we want to share it with someone. That's the Libra. If we have everything organized, but we're by ourselves in our neat little world, then it feels a bit unfulfilling. So Libra is next, where, again, after we get organized and we organize our kingdom, because Virgo comes after Leo, well, then we want to have someone to share it with. A king needs a queen needs a king. If we were only kings and queens, it wouldn't be so bad, but we're not. We're usually a disheveled version of that. And again, at best, we're bringing someone into our life because we're so neat and organized and feel so on it that we want to just share it with someone. That would be the ideal scenario. Unfortunately, that's not always the scenario, is it? It's not always that we bring someone into our life because we're so, organized and together. Many times we bring someone into our life because it's like, ooh, this person will save me. This person will, be my connection to happiness and whatnot. I'm not going to get off on that so much, but that's part of the Virgo Libra thing. Oh, this person will help me clean up my life, or help me get more organized, or help me feel more powerful, right? So there's always a kind of scale of intelligence and wisdom with any of the signs or planets or whatever. But these two signs, Virgo and Libra, this is how they are conducive, to each other. This is the sort of harmony between the two, right? And then we see Libra to Scorpio is a little less harmonious, because Libra to Scorpio is like, okay, now that we've brought someone into our life in that kind of intimate connection, which is Libra, then all of our insecurities and vulnerabilities get kind of triggered in Scorpio. So you can see that's a much less friendly, easy association. From Virgo to Libra, it's much easier. There's more symmetry and synastry and sort of compatibility between the Virgo and the Libra. For example, when we have someone that we love and that we care about, many times we want to do a lot of Virgo things for them. We want to take care of them. We want to invite them over to our house. We want to make the food that they like. We want to go out to a nice place with them and enjoy a kind of nice aesthetic, right? This is all very Virgo Libra kind of crossover, right? We don't really necessarily say, let me get intimately involved with someone so I can get triggered and jealous, and it happens, but it's not really the thing we're looking for, which is the kind of difference between Libra and Scorpio. And by the way, you can track this as a connection between the natural relationship between the planets, right? You can see how Mercury and Venus, as the ruler of these two planets of Virgo and Libra, are much more harmonious than Venus and Mars, which is Libra and Scorpio. You can even go to the next sign. The Scorpio Sagittarius is also, again, much more harmonious, if you want to look at it that way, because Scorpio, and getting sort of, not just in the negative, but certainly somewhat negative, of getting triggered and feeling vulnerable and out of control, which is the real catalyst for Scorpio, naturally flows pretty easily into Sagittarius, which is, so I better find a higher purpose and a meaning and try to figure out what all this means. Those two are they flow into each other pretty easily. Wanting to investigate the real meaning and truth behind things, which is Scorpio, because we feel vulnerable, naturally leads us to, okay, well then I need a teacher. I need a guru. I need to find some answer to this thing that I can't control, which is Sagittarius. Mars and Jupiter are very friendly with each other. It's an interesting exercise, right? So, by the way, I say this as well because on the day that Mercury goes back into Virgo, this is one reason why I wanted to do this intentional kind of check-in here. As soon as Mercury goes back into Virgo, literally tomorrow on the 2nd, Venus goes into Scorpio. So Venus has been in Libra for several weeks, right? And Venus is the ruler of Libra. Well, this is the last day for that. As I'm recording this, by this time tomorrow, Venus is in Scorpio. And again, it's kind of like the thing I just described, where all of that sort of, okay, let's all get along and be friendly and get into an arrangement with each other. By the way, it's not just romantic relationships. It's any kind of cooperative, harmonious connection. Many times it includes things like business partnerships as well. Libra and Venus is very much about that. And then Scorpio is all the vulnerabilities and insecurities that can result once we get in those kinds of associations. So we can expect this shift coming for the next few weeks. So Venus will be there until it goes into Sagittarius at early November. Yeah, actually on October 30th. So it's literally like 29 days, 30 days. During that time, you see Mercury is spending most of that time, or actually all of that time, in Virgo. So Mercury just entered Virgo. Let me go back here. Look, these two planets are shifting here. I'm just noticing this now. But starting tomorrow and until early November and until November 1st, so for all of October, Mercury is going to be in Virgo, in that exalted place. He'll be retrograde, and then he turns direct. He turns direct on the 17th. But all this will be in Virgo at his like highest exaltation degree. So in many ways, this is extremely auspicious because planets are obviously powerful when they're exalted, when they're in their exalted position, but they're also really powerful in Vedic astrology and in Indian astrology and Indian thinking when they're retrograde. Now, again, this is one of the big differences between Western astrology and Indian astrology. And instead of just memorize like, oh, I heard planets are strong in Indian astrology and Vedic astrology. Why? Why is it? Well, it's because of the idea, and this is just my speculation, it's not written literally. We have to infer a lot of knowledge. It's implicit, not explicit. But given the fact that when planets are retrograde, they're moving backwards relative to our life on Earth, we have to understand they're not actually moving backwards. They're still moving forward in the sky. Mercury is still moving forward. It doesn't literally change direction. It just changes direction from our perspective. So everything in astrology is measured from where we are. In this regard, we measure everything astrologically as if we're the center of the universe. This is what's called the Ptolemaic theory. And for all intents and purposes, astrology is basically based on the false idea, but the pragmatic idea that the Earth is the center of the universe. This is one reason why for thousands of years, they sort of believed this. It's hard to know whether they actually believed it or whether they just used it as an effective type of measurement, because again, for all intents and purposes, for the purposes of astrology, we are the center of the universe. Why? Because everything is moving in relation to us. Now, we now know that we aren't the center of the universe, but according to astrology, we basically are. The reason I'm mentioning this is because of things like retrograde. No planets ever literally stop moving around the sun in the direction they're moving and literally stop and move backwards. No, that doesn't happen. But it also doesn't invalidate the principle. And for some reason, there are astrologers now, again, and I'm not trying to insult anybody, but who for some reason want to say, well, because the planet's not actually moving backwards, retrograde is just an illusion and it doesn't really matter astrologically or whatever. Look, I get it, but I also don't get it because it's no different than anything else. What I mean is that our karma and what we're doing with astrology anyway is reading our karma on this earth, our embodied karma as an organism in a body here on this earth. That's what we're reading. And so for all intents and purposes, we're reading everything from where we are. You don't think that's important? Of course it is. If I want to understand your life, I'm going to try to read your life from where you are based on what you're doing. Right now, my life, based on what I'm doing, is I'm sitting here in San Diego, California. I have some lights over here. I have some screens in front of me. I'm looking into a camera. And if people want to really understand my life, they would, especially right now, they would want to understand it first from that perspective, right? The sun is still up. If you're watching this on the East Coast, it's probably nighttime by now or whatever it might be. So we're seeing our life from our existence, from where we're seeing it. And what happens with retrograde is based on this, our lives unfold on Earth according to Earth and the relationship of the Earth to all the other objects moving around, right? But everything is based on that. So again, what I'm saying is when astrologers want to say, well, retrograde is just an illusion, so don't pay attention, you could say it about everything. You know, the Earth, the sun isn't going through the sky. There's no such thing as sunrise then. The sun isn't moving. The Earth is turning. So we're going to not pay attention to that either? What else are we not going to pay attention to? There's no such thing as an eclipse because the sun and moon have nothing to do with each other. Well, they don't. The eclipse is totally seen from where we're watching it. So in that way, there's no such thing as a full moon, a new moon. There's no such thing as anything then. So why just talk about retrograde, right? All of it is being seen from our point of view anyway. So why make that distinction? So the planet is not actually moving back, but that does not mean it's an illusion because it's all being seen from where we are, right? So based on where we are seeing it, that's what's going on. The planet appears to be moving backwards, right? Just like, for example, we now have Jupiter retrograde, Saturn is retrograde, but all of that is just based on where we're seeing it, okay? I started saying that the reason it's strong in Indian astrology and Indian thinking, though, is because things moving backwards become internal. And this is a big difference just between Eastern and Western thought. Eastern thought, things that are internal and reflective, have a lot more power. They have a lot more power because it's the power of introspection. It's the power of reflection. It's the power of being internal instead of external. So Mercury retrograde is, of course, you just take those same principles. We've had Jupiter and Saturn retrograde now for months. They're also about to move forward. Saturn turns direct on the 11th of October, and then Jupiter moves forward on the 19th, I think, 17th, 18th. Okay. So, and by that time, Mercury will also move forward. So you can see both Jupiter and Mercury on the same day move direct on the 18th. So we're going to see a big shift after October 18th because by then all three of these visible retrograde planets will start moving forward. But until then, again, I've talked a lot about Jupiter and Saturn as far as being internal forces and reflecting on what inspires us, which is Jupiter, and what we're committed to, which is Saturn. But Mercury retrograde is really about reflecting on the messages we put out, how we communicate, one of the biggest keywords for Mercury retrograde is to listen. Listening, not just talking. Listening. How good of a listener are we? How much are we listening to the messages? I don't just mean from people. I mean, how much are we listening to the message of life and in our heart and soul and consciousness? Divine listening, Shravana. Shravana is the name of one of the nakshatras, but it also literally means listening and hearing. And that nakshatra is related to Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu is the presiding deity of Mercury. So this idea of listening is very important when Mercury goes retrograde. And especially once you start to detach from the idea that your entire life is some external experience, that your entire life is the people, the situations, your successes and failures, and, again, listening takes on a different dimension. It's not just listening to all the people around you and measuring your success or failure or life or your identity by the people in your life that surround you or something like that. But then listening becomes something very different. It becomes something that is about tuning in and listening to the silence and stillness in your soul, in your heart. Reflecting and listening to that story. This is Mercury, is the story. You're telling yourself a story about everything. And right now, we're just full of stories. We got all kinds of stories about all kinds of things, all kinds of stuff. The big story about what the governments are doing, and the big stories, the conspiracies, the ideas. Got the big stories now, right? We got so many stories. So what happens when Mercury goes retrograde is we can reflect on these stories, become intelligent, apply discrimination, reflect on not just whether these stories are true or not, which is very important, though, by the way, whether or not the things you say are actually true. And I don't mean if you believe them, because you can believe anything. It doesn't mean it's true. These are two different things. And notice the people in your life and around you that say a lot of things that they believe, but those things either aren't true, or you can tell even when they're saying them that they don't know what they're talking about. You might even believe what they're saying, but you can tell that they don't know what they're talking about. Even if you believe what they're saying, you can tell they don't know why they're saying this. They're just repeating something they believe. Again, this is Jupiter-Mercury problems. Jupiter is I believe it. Mercury is I'm going to say it whether I understand it or not. Again, I'm not being critical. I'm just talking about a function of consciousness. The reason you lose credibility with people and other people lose credibility with you is when you say things that you don't understand or know, particularly if you advocate for things and you say, oh no, this is true, this is real, and you don't really know what you're talking about. You don't really understand why you're saying it. You just believe it, and you, again, this disconnect between words and whether or not they're true or not, or factual, is big. Now, again, what I'm saying here, though, is that there's no reason to ever say things that you don't know or understand. You can just say that. There's an option that says, I don't know. This is kind of weird. I'm not really sure what's going on. There's this thing and there's that thing, and you're right. This is really like that, and that too. Man, that's true. This has been like that. There's these things that are wrong and this and that, but I don't really know what it means. I'm really not sure. I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure it out and then do my best. That's much more reliable than, oh no, this is the truth because I saw this, or and it's like somebody way ahead of their skis and expertise, but they're not ahead of their words, and they're behind them 1,000%, and they're whatever. A lot of that now, you think? A lot of it. I'm not saying this to try to throw shade at people. I'm saying this because now is a time for us all, not just to introspect and get the story right, but to have wisdom about the function of speech and the story we're telling ourselves and we're telling others, and a place where, I said this in an update a couple of days ago, I guess it was, that the part that bothers me about, or that makes me sad to see these things now, because of the energy behind it, not because I'm mad that people are saying things that are wrong, but particularly people that I care about, particularly people that I like, who I at least have respected before, to see them sucked up into things where I can tell they don't know what they're talking about. They think they do. And it's not just because their information is wrong, but I can just feel the anger and the paranoia and the unhappiness in their life. I don't have to infer this. I can see it. I can hear it. You can hear it and see it. Where people are so bought into some way of seeing the world now, they really, in many ways, have no idea whether any of it is true. Or if it is true, if parts of it are true, it's definitely not true in the measure that it's being amplified in their heart and mind and consciousness. And even if it were factually true, what is it giving them? Which is ultimately the ultimate truth. What are these stories giving us? They're all some version of this world is wrong, and now I'm right about something, and now I'm jacked up about it. But all of it on some level, even at best, is some version of I am this person in this world, and all of this injustice and hypocrisy and conspiracy, all of it is real. It's real. I'm real. My attachment to it is real. It's real. And I'm stressed out about it. And now I'm spreading it everywhere. And inside the person's heart, it's like, what is this giving you? That's the part that hurts me. I'm like, look, I get it. Look, I'll just say on a personal level, I've been, frankly, pissed off about the world my whole life. I wrote a song in 1986. I'll tell you how old I am. Called Media Gods. Media Gods. Talking about how disgusted I was with the media. 1986. Knowing that it was all just, I'm not looking for a shepherd in the daily news. No innuendos or opinion polls trying to lead me to a point of view. We're on your screen, we're the media gods. So on your knees, we're the media gods. I owe my brain to the media gods for trying to educate a dummy like me. Not to mention about Republicans, Democrats. I don't call myself a Democrat. Still, the GOP is not where it's at. It's like, yes, I get it. All of it. Anyway, the point is, what I'm saying, though, is that the part that hurts me about it is just that what it does to consciousness and to our mind and to the Atman. Because underneath it all, we are Atman. Atman. Do you know what Atman is? It's the undifferentiated self. It's the self beyond incarnation. Param Atman, supreme being, which is not local being, body, mind. It's not Jiva Atman, which is the matrix through which our karma comes down into the body, mind, nervous system structure. We are ultimately Atman, Param Atman, supreme, undifferentiated self. That's who we are. All of this infuriating, crazy, weird, and ultimately Maya. That does not mean we don't care. That does not mean we turn away. But the challenge of, like, for example, Mercury is to have discrimination and to not reach for conclusions and especially create stories, to create false stories, create illusions based on our tendencies, our samskaras, and our fears and worries and paranoias and things like that. That's our nature. It's our nature to grab the conspiracy theory. It's our nature to grab the dark story. And the people who grab for those things grab for them all the time, not just in these days. These days right now are just exacerbating it. But the tendencies are there. And you know this, every person you see around you who has grabbed onto these things, they've been grabbing onto them in one way or another forever, ever since you've known them. But now, because things are so exacerbated, there's the tendency to grab to them more and then say, see, and more of the attachment to it. And the power of Mercury is to actually get the story straight. When Mercury's retrograde, it's a time not just to listen externally or to the people around us, but internally. And I don't just mean to the stories and, again, to those who are triggered by me talking about conspiracies and whatnot, because it'll happen. People will now get all triggered and say things like, oh, sure. So in other words, we're supposed to trust everything the mainstream media. So in other words, we're not supposed to ever question anything. No. There are about 100 steps between questioning things and then just believing things that we don't know to be factual. My point always is, why believe anything? The truth of the matter is, I don't believe in anything. There's no reason to believe in anything. There really isn't. When Mercury goes retrograde, it's the time to question our story, because those stories are defining your life in that regard. Mercury and Venus are those two that are really navigating what this life and this world through the body, mind, nervous system, what it really means, and interpreting that identity, interpreting those interactions, and literally the voice in your head that says, this is what life is. Life is this. I am this. You are this. Here's the story I've created. And when the story is something like, okay, the Great Reset is blah, blah, and it's the da-da, and the ha-ha, and yeah, and that's what's going on, and that's the story, then that's going to be a lot of your life. When the story is, yeah, this is like, obviously really dark times, we got to be really careful. But, the world has been like this forever. Now we see it more. But I'm still the Supreme Self, the Paramatman. It doesn't really change. And we're also on the cusp of enormous change and possibility. And these dark things don't change without these moments of kind of letting go and revealing all of these corrupt structures that are there. And by the way, they've been there forever. And we need to be careful not to create false connections and whatever it might be. Personally, I don't even construct the story so much anymore because I've seen the story for so long. Now, what I see is just the kind of mass awakening and a real temptation, again, to fill in gaps that don't exist. Instead of be practical. If we're going to make practical change in the world, it's still going to be in some kind of practical way. So aside from that, part of it in our mind as it involves things in the world. In your life and in your world, again, it's very much about how your story, your personal story, is unfolding and what you think is possible for you. And remembering the things I just said about your true nature. Once you remember the true nature, your true nature as the Atman, the Paramatman, the Supreme Being, then this just feels like it's always felt. It's illusion, it's Maya. It doesn't mean it isn't real. It just means it's not the only thing that's real. And you can travel much lighter. I know for myself, as much as I feel sad seeing all of the triggering and the ignorance and the polarizing around me, again, I feel more sad seeing those who buy into it and their stress, when I know, especially those who I know who are so much more capable and who really, quote, know all of this. Again, people know that that's their true nature, but they just tend to forget it or not put it into practice. So it's a time for us to remember. And when we do, it's much easier to smile, to be gracious, to be less angry at those who we don't agree with or whatever it might be, less, especially less like paranoid and convinced of all the darkness, of all the stuff. We know, I mean, I see people who are so locked in to the certainty of how, controlled we are, and tyranny, and just the whole thing. And there's no way that kind of energy isn't just wearing day to day, depressing, people getting so depressed. And I think much of it is just self-created. Let me take a drink here. So what we're seeing now, one second, also is that, and by the way, just to say, for myself, especially the last couple months or so, I've been feeling so hopeful and so light in my own life. I mean, I've actually, in my dashas, I've been in Venus Moon dasha, which is often a pretty intense time. I've definitely been feeling just the reality of what that means for me, which is like, Venus is about connections and relationships and all of that. And the moon is also about connection and relationships and all that. And, I haven't been in a romantic relationship for about a couple years now. Haven't had really that much interest, a few interests here and there maybe, but it hasn't been a big part of my life. It would be very easy, and even at times feeling, I wouldn't say lonely, because I don't really get so lonely, but realizing that I'm not involved with someone in a romantic relationship, so to speak. But also just feeling such gratitude and just feeling very blessed with all the great things in my life, all the beautiful things in my life. Especially as it relates to things like, obviously with my work, but also, spending a lot of time doing things that I enjoy, like I've talked about, playing tennis and doing other outdoor activities, and just really returning, especially to things that are very grounded, even like my spiritual practices and meditation practices and whatnot, have been very deep. even in the midst of a cycle that's not always so easy, particularly when you're not involved with the thing. Like, for example, the moon is also related to family and that kind of thing. And again, it's like those things that aren't really a big part of my life could lead to depression and all these sorts of things. And even like the paranoia, or I don't know, whatever it might be, because the moon is always an emotional time. But it's actually just been very deep, very devotional. But those possibilities of getting sort of triggered or depressed or sad, or especially with what's going on in the world, they're always there, sort of tempting us. They never go away, particularly in times like this. It's not to say that I don't also feel these things, that I don't also feel these things in great, with a lot of force. I also feel these things, and I could also be very tempted, and to get despondent, paranoid about what might happen in the world. And I do notice these things, especially with our financial world. I'm sad about the state of things, like obviously, like the environment. I see in the U.S. so many dangerous things with our laws, with the courts. There's all kinds of things that just make me feel really sad and a little bit, and scared about where things might be going. There's no question about it. But one of the biggest things that we have is the idea and the need to live presently, to be in the present moment. And the present moment is where everything is. In fact, there is no past or future. Everything is about the present. And in the present moment, there are no problems or stresses or worries. There's only that moment now that keeps going deeper. And one of the things that's really shown by this by this capacity now, and with the astrology especially, is we have this really powerful Saturn and Jupiter and these planets in Capricorn. Particularly this Saturn in Capricorn has really been nailing down that capacity for deeper stillness and silence, meditation. Is very important now in these times. And I said it when Saturn entered Capricorn a couple of years ago, or actually at the beginning of 2020, right when COVID started, that the biggest things we were going to have to really go through for the next couple of years is to really learn how to be alone and find the gift in that. And the power of solitude, and literally that our mental and emotional state will be revealed. It's going to be revealed how much, how real we are and how clear we are with the Saturn energy, which is those deeper core realities of life that I've been talking about, like that we are the Atman, that this is our nature, and we need to reckon with our nature in solitude, by ourselves. Again, even when we're in a relationship. Again, many people, I started this by saying in the beginning that many people have relationships because it's a sort of hedge against being alone. We get in relationships and then we want to be there because we don't want to be alone. We're afraid of the dark. We're afraid of being alone. One of the biggest things that Saturn has taught us since the beginning of 2020 is that you are alone. By the way, in case you didn't know it, you are alone. You're alone. And one day you'll die. And everyone you know will die. Aren't you glad you're listening to me today? But that's the physical world that you've incarnated into. And Saturn is the energy where we need to make peace with that. And you only have as much peace as you can be peaceful with that. Because that's the ultimate truth, is that. And Saturn in Capricorn is the placement that brings the awareness of that. And the fear of that, and the stress of that. And since early 2020, that's been the most prevailing energy. Notice how, again, if you remember these things, if you think about these things from the point of view of the Atman, and that you're an Atman, that you're a soul, look at how much, again, on an individual level, people's, again, paranoias and things and whatnot are triggered just by that simple fact. This is me. I'm living here. I need to try to control something that I have no control over. So I've got to have a story about how much flows from that core principle. And the need to make peace with that stark reality is really the most important thing that we're going to be doing for the rest of this year and also next year. Because Saturn isn't leaving Capricorn until even through next year. So there was a reason that this stuff got real beginning of last year. Saturn went into Capricorn. We had all of this stuff start. We were all locked in our house. And now we're sort of getting out of it in some way. Or we're just ready now to say, okay, enough. And by the way, as these planets start moving forward, the good news is we're going to start moving forward. I think that especially by the end of October and into November, even in the world, for example, as these planets start moving forward, in the middle of October, as Mercury starts moving forward, and Jupiter and Saturn, all three are forward, will be probably insisting more on things culturally moving forward. We're going to start to see that, start to increase as well. As it relates, I don't know if you've all seen, but, as it relates to things like breakthroughs in the treatment of COVID and whatnot, there's some very hopeful things right around the corner, especially with treatments that have been tested and studied in great measure. And I mean, these are real treatments, not things like ivermectin, which, again, it was also been studied here and there, but it showed marginal improvement, not enough to recommend. Very sensible why, again, the CDC and whatnot didn't come out and prescribe that or recommend that. Again, this is another one of these things that just catches fire and conspiracy. Oh, they don't want you to know. Look, that's not the kind of thing. That's just simply not the way the system works, nor should it, because it would be reckless to just something that had such a negligible net benefit. But there are things that definitely have been much more, that have been studied more, that have a much more favorable and clear net benefit. I don't remember what the one thing was called, a treatment. Also, the monoclonal antibodies and also the remdesivir. These are three things that I think are going to be coming out in the next few months that have been studied and that have been also developed for these specific, treatment of COVID symptoms. Frankly, the thing that's bothered me more is that these things haven't been more forthcoming, and maybe it was because of needing of an emphasis on vaccines and the corruption with pharmaceutical. It absolutely could be part of it. Definitely that there haven't been better tests mobilized and treatments that we know to be like totally effective. That's right around the corner. And the affordability of this, and by the way, it looked like this was part of the recent thing that I believe Biden talked about, of making the monoclonal antibodies available to everyone. So again, notwithstanding, it's not as if I'm only paying attention to that as benefit, there are also many more beneficial treatments, and people that are using the remdesivir, the ivermectin or the other things that have been benefited from it, even online. All that's good. We've gotten a lot more information about things, even like the zinc and other home treatments have definitely lowered the fatalities and done nothing but make it so that the virus itself is not as deadly. And we're going to see all of these things improve. I think we'll start to see some real improvements in treatments and getting back to something a little bit normal, maybe even surprisingly, once all three of these planets are moving forward by the end of November. And again, that's going to be at the height of like flu season and all that stuff too. So it's kind of a risky prediction to make because it's actually kind of like the time when some of it should get worse based on winter and stuff. But I have a feeling that, not just have a feeling, but also it's not just a feeling, but it's all of these retrograde planets, especially the Saturn retrograde in Capricorn all this time, Jupiter going back into Capricorn as well, can show shows this concentration of energy and this concentration in research. And as these planets move forward again, I think it's going to be a great improvement where there's going to be better treatments available, and people will be able to do that, and then we can pressure governments, especially, etc., to lighten up the restrictions, right? So we'll talk about a few other things here. Just again, this is mainly about the Mercury retrograde, but again, just one thing to say is that as I said, from October 2nd until November 1st or so for all of October, early November, Mercury is going to be in Virgo. So Mercury is also going to be exalted there. So again, this is powerful. In October, we have exalted and retrograde Mercury. So again, this can also really be powerful. Mainly the thing I wanted to convey is unraveling the story and the kind of fake news in your head that we're all generating a little bit, whether it's personal or professional or experiential in the world and whatnot. Really getting clear, getting calm and still, and using our real discrimination and listening to that inner wisdom. October is going to be great for that in general because Mercury will be in Virgo retrograde until the 17th, right? Then he goes into Libra, where he'll be for the next month, right? You'll see he'll be there through November, the end of November, November 20th, I believe it was. Yeah. So for much of November as well, Mercury will be in Libra, where we'll be feeling a lot more of like the diplomacy and the relationship, connection, communication. Now, again, I've talked a lot about, Mars is combust during this time as well. So there's going to be quite a bit of frustration and whatnot. I did a whole web class on Mars combust. You can search my channel to watch that. I don't want to go over every single thing every time I do an update. But this Mercury retrograde, again, between that cycle between Virgo and Libra, we're like right in the middle of it now. It started at the end of August. We still have it until the end of November. Really a great time to work through and to organize your thoughts, your mind, connect it with the people in your life that you want to be connected with, form alliances with them. Again, one of the great things as well after the Mercury retrograde cycle, particularly going back into Libra, is it's also a great time for things like apologizing to people you may have hurt. So especially at the end of October and into November, when Mercury goes into Libra, you might find yourself realizing after reflecting on things like, I didn't need to do that. I kind of lost my way, and give a heartfelt apology. Right? Particularly when Mercury goes through Libra, October and November, most of November, I should say most of November to November 20th. You can always apologize beforehand. And again, it feels really good to apologize. And, sometimes it's hard. I know the people in my life that when someone gives a heartfelt apology for something that happened, it's so healing, right? And it deepens the friendship. Well, not just relationships like romantic ones, but friendships as well. It builds trust. And it's not like you need an apology for everything. Like there's most things I don't need an apology for, but when and still I might not be angry at the person or hate them or carry hatred in my heart. But what it means is when you see that someone can do things that are really kind of vicious and a bit hateful and whatnot, and they just do it and they won't apologize for it. It doesn't mean you hate them, but it means that you don't trust them. This is why you don't trust people. You don't trust them because you're like, you don't even get it. You don't even get how vicious that was. And again, it doesn't mean you hate them. You might sympathize with them and go, look, I understand that they're still a good person and all, but it makes it so you just don't trust them again because they don't know and they don't care. And again, you just also lose respect for them. So think of things that you've done where you really owe someone an apology, where it's like, you know what, I acted beneath my standard of dignity, and you deserved better than that. Not because you expect anything in return, but because it's the right thing to do. And you hear, or I hear from some people that I've met who have a hard time apologizing, and when they try to explain it, they'll be like, well, I was going to, but then, I wasn't sure what they were going to say because I'd apologize and then they'd still be blah, blah, or whatever. Again, then it's just all about you. It's all about your ego. You don't apologize because you're thinking of their response to it. Well, maybe I'll apologize and they won't forgive me. So what? You don't apologize for what you get. You apologize because you violated another person and you want them to know you're sorry. And you want them to know that you think they're a beautiful person that didn't deserve that. That's why you do it. I know I'm not trying to be pedantic, but it's just like, that's why. Not because, well, what if I apologize and you don't forgive me? Then I'm going to feel worse. Okay, well, then it's all about you. And that's why you don't apologize. I'm saying this just in case you're in that mode. Think about it. And how healing it is and how much growth is in doing that. I'm saying this too because, again, everybody doesn't have a powerful Mercury, or they have problems with planets in Libra and whatever. And this is where those things get hung up. Again, difficult planets in Virgo or in Libra, or Mercury being difficult, or I don't know. This is what makes those things hard. This is what karma is. This is how it shows up. When people have issues with, and when they wind up in problematic interactions with people where relationships get stuck or they act a certain way and they can't apologize or they don't make it better and whatever, and there winds up being resentments that last for a lifetime. This is why. This is how it shows up. That's why I'm mentioning these kinds of things. Because if that's something for you, or you have a hard time apologizing, first of all, it's not funny. People are like, yeah, I never apologize. It's not funny. It's not funny to the people in your life that you hurt who maybe want to trust you. And maybe, maybe they don't hate you, but it's not cute or funny or anything. It's painful, and you bear the karmic responsibility for that. You wind up suffering because of it in your isolation and in people not liking you or whatever it might be. So think about that. The Venus going through Scorpio will also, again, through the month of October, So from October until early November, Venus in Scorpio is also going to contribute to some of that. I'll do a separate class about Venus in Scorpio. But I want to end this about an hour, not go over. We've just gone an hour. So anyway, I hope this was helpful for you to hear me talk about some of the Mercury retrograde things and the possibilities and the things that could maybe be helpful. And you take care.